we're live.
Thank you. Welcome to the Planning Applications Committee. I'm Councillor Linda Kirby. Do we have any apologies for absence, please? No apologies. Okay, declarations of pecuniary interest. Anybody? Councillor Crowe, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Regarding item number 9, to Wimbledon, to Westcombe Avenue, I have a non-pecuniary interest in this item, as does Councillor Dean. So we will be withdrawing when this matter is discussed and not voting. Okay,
thank you for letting us know. Minutes of the previous meeting, can we agree those as a correct record, please? Just nod. Councillor, yeah, thank you. Just for the public's interest, officers will introduce the reports. If you are speaking, you will have 3 minutes and you will be reminded after each minute of your time. So it would be helpful if you can get what you want to say within that 3-minute period. Otherwise, I will have to say to you that your time is over. We've changed the order of the agenda tonight. We've got agenda item 5, then agenda item 8, agenda item 6, 7 and 9 to follow. So this evening we're beginning with agenda item 5, which is the Bishopsford Road Bridge. And as I've said, the officer will introduce this report. Once the report has been introduced and objectors have had their chance to speak, or agents or councillors, we will then move to the committee, first of all to ask questions about the report and then to make comments, and we will then make a decision on each application tonight. So that's how the committee will operate. So can I pass over to the officer, please, to introduce the Bishopsford Road Bridge item, please, item 5.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, councillors. Good evening, Chair. Item 5 on the agenda is Bishopsford Road Bridge. I'm going to share my screen so that we can see the pictures and slides and so on. Just get that for a second. Okay, can everyone see that okay? Yeah, I think that's okay. All right. Sorry, bear with me. I'm trying to get my can everyone see that okay? Yeah. Yes. Okay. I'm not going to be able to do this. Sorry, bear with me. I've just, okay. So this application for erection of replacement bridge to reconnect Bishopsford Road to London Road has been submitted following partial collapse of the bridge during strengthening works undertaken in 2019. This plan application is brought before Planning Applications Committee for consideration due to the scope and number of representations. Sorry, you're probably not seeing everything here. Sorry. Okay. Unfortunately, I'm having difficulties downloading some of these images. So what I'll do is I'll just move straight to discussing the application, presenting the application. So the site comprises of Bishopswood Road Bridge, which runs over the River Wandle. To the west of the site lies part of the Ravensbury Park and adjoins a wooden footbridge that crosses the River Wandle. To the east of the site lies the National Trust Land and Watermead Nature Reserve, and to the southeast, the site lies Tooting, to the southeast lies the Tooting and Mitchum Community Sports Club. The application site is situated within the Wandle Valley Conservation Area, sub-area 5 and 6, and located within the flood zones 2 and 3. In terms of environmental planning designations within the Council's adopted policies, the sites are identified as MOL, Metropolitan Open Land, Wandle Valley designation, Green Corridor, Ravensbury Park designation, and in Green Chains designation. The existing bridge comprises of 3 arch masonry bridge and constructed in brick materials. The length of the bridge is 22 meters, which is 72 foot, width 10 meters, 33 foot, height 1.7 meters, which is 6 foot, with 2 piers in the water and 2 vehicle lanes, including shared pedestrian and cycle lanes on the bridge. The proposed bridge will be constructed in the same location as the existing bridge and will not change the current profile of the alignment or the river, of the River Wandle. The proposed bridge comprises of clear span structure with soffit level of 19.2 meters above ordnance datum, and that's 62 foot, and a span of 10 meters, 32 foot. Proposals would also involve widening the bridge to incorporate improved pedestrian and cycle access for all, in accordance with local and national policies and guidance. The proposals would provide an enhanced and improved replacement bridge, creating a positive contribution to the visual amenities of Wandle Valley Conservation Area and the heritage assets, whilst maintaining and preserving the natural ecology and preserving the biodiversity of the Ravensbury Park and Watermeads area. The proposal would also comply with environmental agencies' requirements, as the scheme would result in further reductions to flood risk. The proposed scheme would maintain the vitality of the site and its contribution to the local area. Officers consider that there are no adverse impacts that would significantly or noticeably outweigh the benefits of the scheme when assessed against the policies and guidance, and respectfully request for members to grant permission for this plan application subject to conditions and informatives. Thank you.
Thank you. You're not the first person, can I say, that has had difficulties with the presentations on Zoom. So
Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry that's happened to you.
Oh,
yeah, sorry. Can I just intervene there? If you do need to see the plans, I should be able to make them available for viewing here if members want to see them during the course of deliberations.
Thank you. That would be helpful. I'm going to call on Tony Burton, please, to speak.
Good evening. I'm Tony Burton, Secretary of Mitchum Cricket Green Community and Heritage, the civic society for this part of Mitchum. This planning application is very different to those you usually consider. A major piece of public infrastructure costing millions of pounds and designed to last well over 100 years. It needs to work as well in 2130 as it does in 2030, and it needs to respect this historic crossing of the Wandle, providing the gateway to Mitchum. Now is not the time to dwell on the mismanagement that has caused the collapse of the bridge and the subsequent failure to meet any of the public deadlines set for the project to replace it. But I urge you to remember the time that has been lost when others say there is no time for further thought to deliver a better solution. Everyone wants a replacement bridge and everyone wants it quickly. And given how long it will last, it needs to be both fit for purpose and fit for the future. This is why you carry such a heavy responsibility in reaching your decision this evening. It is why the plans have attracted such attention from such a wide range of local groups and organisations, although not one of them gets a mention in the officer's report. We don't have time to list them all now, but have just tweeted a list of 16 for your information. These plans fall short on 2 levels. First, they cause unnecessary harm. They will needlessly fell trees and remove an historic wall. They will expose neighbouring residents and Ravensbury Park to vehicle noise and pollution. They harm the conservation area and they tarmac metropolitan open land. The chosen design is the option rejected by the public when consulted. It has failed to get the support of the design review panel. And as others have patiently explained, the plans entirely fail to meet well-established cycling standards that cyclists must be treated as vehicles and not pedestrians. The new bridge will be out of date even before it is built. This is reason enough to turn down the plans. But they also fail to take advantage of opportunities for better design. We are told there isn't the space available. Thankfully, this isn't the case. Officers have admitted they haven't even spoken to neighbouring landowners about using other land. This is despite the National Trust being sympathetic to Watermeads being part of a better solution. And be wary of siren voices saying that there are no better alternatives, because those designs have never been prepared. Government policy is clear, and I quote, "Permission should be refused for development of poor design that fails to take the opportunities available for improving the character and quality of an area and the way it functions." This development fails that test. There are opportunities begging to be taken. We know that Merton Council turning down a planning application from Merton Council cannot be easy. We also know that you know the way decisions are being made by planning committees is subject to growing scrutiny. We know you will approach the decision with an independent mind. Please reject these plans and allow a better Mitchum Bridge to be designed and delivered without delay. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call on Jane Plant, please? Jane, can you unmute yourself, please? Thank you. Jane, you're still muted. Can't hear you.
Okay, unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. Thank you.
I am sorry. I'm Jane Plant, representing Friends and the Tree Wardens, whose volunteers both regularly give their time for the park. I don't need to point out that this application is against council policy in respect of loss of MOL, loss of public open space, detrimental impact on the conservation area, loss of tree canopy cover. The character of the river through Ravensbury Park and beyond is special. A different world away from traffic and noise, which should be appreciated and protected as an asset of the borough. If approved, this application will adversely impact on the peaceful character of this well-used area. The brick wall and strip of woodland to be removed separates the park and road, protects the park from views of traffic, noise and pollution. This tree screen contains species appropriate to the riverside and park setting, of varying appearance and natural development, which contribute to the ecology and character of the area. The tree report is misleading because most trees to be felled are listed as of fair or good quality. So it may be helpful for members to appreciate their true value. CAVAT, a nationally recognised method, stands for Capital Asset Valuation of Amenity Trees. The ARB manager of green spaces, who manages all trees in parks and open spaces and has objected with his department to the application, has assessed the affected trees and found that of the 14 trees on council land, the 12 in fair or good condition have a total value of £500,000, and those to be felled are valued at £48,000. The officer's report states that an equal number plus 2 will be planted, which I estimate will cost only £10,000. However, there is inadequate space for that number on the reduced park area. This outdated approach based on numbers alone fails to retain and protect canopy cover, let alone increase it. It is not sustainable and is clearly inadequately funded. It should be acknowledged that the loss of a mature tree cannot be compensated by planting a sapling. It takes years of maintenance to establish and many years for the tree cover to match that loss. a sum based on caveat, ring-fenced for planting and maintenance somewhere locally, would fund 10 times the number of trees. This is exactly the kind of change in approach that's needed to even begin to address the council's declared climate emergency. Thank you.
Can I call on Russ Blaber, please?
Good evening, Chair. Thank you very much. Hope you can hear me okay.
I can.
My name is Russ Blaber. I speak as the independent agent for the applicant. Over the past 12 months, I've been working very closely with Merton's applicant team, including James McGinley, Paul McGarry, Tom Sly and Tara Butler of Future Merton. Partial collapse of the bridge in June last year has presented a number of considerable challenges for the council. The loss of a critical piece of local infrastructure has affected people's lives, particularly those travelling to key sites such as the local St Heliers Hospital. The council sought to not only replace the bridge, but has worked very hard to design a bridge that is fit for purpose and affords the necessary road and cycle transportation opportunities required by all modern standards. The very nature of the bridge and its location presents a complex number of constraints, all of which have to be navigated. The tree proximity on both sides of the bridge, river ecology, Environment Agency requirements, flood and flow analysis, cycle travel, land ownership constraints, existing critical services, and current highway standards have all represented constraints and factors that have had to be addressed. Despite this, the council's application team have been able to design a bridge that truly maximises what is possible within these multiple constraints. The new bridge is of modern sound design. It has additional cycle capacity, it reduces flood risk to properties, and is approved by the Environment Agency after stringent consultation. It also enhances the local amenity. Within the constraints that exist, there are factors that are simply not within the council's gift to control. As with many planning applications, the applicant team has to balance all of these issues rather than focus on just one aspect alone. We have listened to what was heard at the pre-application consultation in May and June, and following this, the bridge design changed to add a segregated cycle lane northbound and a 3-metre wide shared surface for pedestrians and cyclists to the southbound. This complies with the latest government guidance on cycle design. Alongside this resides the existing footpath and the path through Ravensbury Estate. We have heard objections to the application. On the matter of the widening of the bridge further still into National Trust land, this is unviable, not least because of the harm to directly adjacent ecology and trees, but also due to designated land issues on the directly adjacent nature reserve. This would be likely to result in material objections from statutory consultees such as the Environment Agency. Lining the bridge in this way would also have a significant adverse impact on the surrounding area. It's also very important that we balance the needs of pedestrians and cyclists alike and not reduce facilities for one at the expense of another. Not approving this application would mean that the council would be placed in a position where it would simply not be able to square the competing objections, despite having designed a fully compliant and well-considered bridge, which you see before you today. The new bridge offers not only a return to normality for many residents after a long period of time, it represents a tangible improvement. The application is supported by the Environment Agency and the Met Police designing out crime officer, who has taken into specific consideration the wall that's been referenced by some of the objectors. Historic England, Transport for London, and the local residents and businesses living near the bridge have signed petitions. Complies with the latest standards, including the latest Department for Transport Cycle Design Guide, and is fully accessible for all. The council is now ready to proceed with the reinstatement of this vital infrastructure for the benefit of local residents and businesses, and very much hopes to place this bridge back into the public realm as soon as feasibly possible. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to any of the comments that have been made before I ask Councillor McCabe to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. I can answer the question, respond to some of the objections that have been received.
Thank you.
Before I could continue, I'd also like to say that this afternoon a petition was received by the officer for the proposed design of the bridge in support of the application with 33 signatures. So unfortunately, we were unable to add that into the update report because that came in after 2 p.m. So just to address committee now that signature with 33 in addition to the ones that's already been received has been submitted and received by officers. So just to start off with the first comment from Tony, thank you for your comment. I think in terms of, as quite rightly mentioned earlier, that in terms of the further widening of the bridge, there's going to be further implications in terms of the bridge has already been widened on the west side. To further widen it on the east side would have significant ecological and transport barriers. Some of these would be to permanently reducing the width of the existing pavement outside the houses of London Road on the Mitchum town side and removing some on-street parking and crossovers, and also further harm to reducing some of the trees on the highway, as these will not be able to be replaced on the narrow pavements. There'll also be other complications in terms of implications on utilities diversions and how these would be facilitated. Currently, at the moment, the design itself shows that there's quite a significant amount of access for cyclists. There's in total 3 if you look at the access on the pedestrian and cycle shared access and the separate access, and also the footpath access, plus the highway. That would be 5 in total for cyclists and only 2 for pedestrians. So it's about trying to ensure, in line with the Healthy Streets for London Department for Transport guidance, which talks about equal access for pedestrians and cyclists. That is the element, that is the most important thing. And I think the scheme has achieved that and meets and complies with our policies and also the London Plan and guidances. But furthermore, in terms of if we are to try and think about the attempt on making extensions of the bridge, there would be significant ecological problems in terms of resulting in greater width of shade area that would adversely affect the aquatics and ecology and habitats. The Environment Agency would not be happy with increased width of shading. There'll be several larger trees that would be lost as a result, and any extra width of the footprint would result in roots not being able to be severely impacted as a result, and would mean that they would need to be felled. Not to mention that this would have a huge impact on the setting of the heritage assets. Historically, have looked at the scheme and they've accepted the scheme as it is in terms of not having any impact on heritage assets. Extending it further could mean that we would need to revisit those issues, and I'm not confident that there wouldn't be any impact. I think there would be an impact on heritage assets and the amenities of the conservation area. But looking at the impact on the trees on the eastern side on Watermeads, some of these trees have got very high ecological value, and also would have a significant impact in terms of financially losing some of those trees. They're valued at quite high. I think that those are the implications. So it also comes with the fact that you'd have to realign the road network, and that comes at significant concern as well in terms of trying to make that work. So yeah, the implications are much larger and much higher. And I think for what we've got the scheme at the moment in terms of the acceptance from Environment Agency, Heritage England, and ecology, it's a scheme that has been tested and it works and in line with policy. So I think trying to revisit a further widening of the bridge may potentially have an impact on some of the ecology and all the other things I've just mentioned, but might not work. And so therefore there'll be further delays in the bridge not opening. I think that's the concern that officers have. Not to mention as well that the report, the water framework directive would need to be revisited, and that basically talks about flow of water under the bridge. So if you extend the bridge any further, you're potentially having harm in the water flowing under the bridge, which Environment Agency would have some issues with, and certainly we would need to revisit and remodel the flood risk assessment. So those are the kinds of implications that officers would have to come under in terms of assessing that as further widening of the bridge. Looking at sort of Jane Plant's comments, which talks about the impact on the MOL land, I would just like to mention that officers have considered the development and its impact on the MOL and the Wandle Valley Conservation Area. and have considered the proposals would provide a positive contribution to enhance the visual amenities. Quite a lot of the views from the MOL are covered by some of the foliage that you get further down the downstream and upstream. And so the impacts wouldn't be significant. And in fact, actually having a design where it is more integrating, you have railings that you could look out and stop as you're cycling or walking. That allows an improvement and enhancement, which is one of the key aspects of assessing heritage assets. It's about, it doesn't only create a good scheme that works, but it's also about how does it improve or enhance the heritage assets. And I think that's what the design does. And that's what we need to consider, and officers consider it in that sense, and consider the application actually accords with the policies of DM01 of the Sites and Policies Plan. Now, removing the wall, in terms of removing the wall, I think what we have to remember is it's not the actual wall that had significant archaeological or historic interest. It's the siting of the boundary. The heritage assets fully looks at that, and Historic England also evaluates that. Our conservation officer looked at that, and the replacement of the wall with railings takes note of the historic boundary of that that setting. So there is no impact, greater impact in that sense. So our officers have considered and on balance assessed that. I think in terms of the trees, we've noted that yes, there are some trees of fair value, but also quite a lot of these trees are of very low amenity value. All trees were classified as being mainly landscape value. Some trees stood out as being with larger sized, some of the larger sized trees stood out as having some fair amenity value, and most of the other trees were young, small and poorly structured specimens, in particular to the northeast boundary of the bridge, which has a dense cluster of low quality trees and saplings. I'd like to draw members' attention to London Plan Policy 7.21, which looks at the Mayor's Tree and Woodland Framework that promotes the guiding of principles of right place and right tree, taking account of context within which the tree is to be planted and addressing the issues of planting species appropriate to expected future climates. And I think when officers assessed this application, we had in mind a condition that would allow officers and specialist officers in green spaces and arboriculturists to be able to be instrumental in selecting the type of trees that would be suitable for that location. So I'll draw members' attention to condition 6, which is on page 32 of the PAC report, that requires the applicants to provide a scheduled list of planting types to be agreed by the specialist officers and plan officers that would be suitable for the location and considered to have sort of fast growth and adequate foliage. So what we're doing is we're not replacing it. Yes, we're not replacing it like for like, but you are replacing for a type of tree species that's suitable and has quick growth and good enough foliage to ensure that there is adequate screening to avoid pollution, noise, traffic, and create that sense of seclusion. But at the same time, what's really important, and in line with the Metropolitan Officer's Crime Design Prevention Officer states that it's about having eyes on the streets, natural surveillance, and ensuring that the place is accessible for everyone, whether young and old, anyone to be able to use the space. And at the moment, it is not inviting and welcoming to people. So I think it's about drawing on balance what works in that location, and design currently does that. In terms of the capital assets value, I'd like to draw members' attention back to 7.21, the London Plan Policy, which states that boroughs should develop appropriate policies to implement their borough tree strategy. The council has done that and adopted policy DM02. And the policy actually states that we're not required to do a caveat assessment. I think the importance is that the policy states that the guidelines of British Standards 5837 2012 should be looked at, and all arboricultural method statements should be assessed in line with this guidance to ensure that the proposals do not have harm and impact on the trees. Our policies and the London Plan policies also states that where there are loss of any trees, then there should be adequate replacement for trees. And as I've mentioned, condition 6 covers that sufficiently. Okay.
That's it.
I think that's it for me. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Peter McCabe.
Thank you, Chair. And could I thank you for agreeing to let me speak? Could I thank the members of the committee for giving me a hearing? You very rarely see me at planning. I think, I always have great respect for those of us willing to do this work, because I understand how difficult it is, and I've avoided it throughout my 33 years on the council. But I come here when there is an issue that affects my ward and my constituents and the people that I represent. And I was one of the first on the scene when the bridge collapsed. And since then, I've been playing a very active role in trying to get it repaired, trying to get the new bridge. And I think the officers have tried extremely hard to come up with a plan that meets all the conflicting needs. And we've heard what they are, and you can't please everyone. But what is true is that they've come up with a sound design with additional cycling capacity. It reduces the flood risk to properties and is approved by the Environment Agency. And they have tried to balance all these conflicting issues. It seems to me that when you've got the support of the Metropolitan Police, Historic England, Transport for London, and most importantly, local residents. And I've spent a great deal of time recently talking to them, and I've shown them the latest leaflet that was sent out by officers. And the first question from me is, have you seen this? And the answer overwhelmingly is, yes, we have. And my next question was, what do you think of it? And what they have said, people overwhelmingly have said, is that they think it's a better bridge. They like the design. They think it looks good. And the people living close to this bridge really do feel that it's something that they will be, they look forward to using in the very near future. Local residents want to take their kids to school, take loved ones to hospital, get to work, do the shopping, go about their business. And for too long, their lives have been disrupted. They think this is a good solution. They actually like the design of this bridge. They are in support of it. And I hope that you will take their views into account. And I hope you will accept the recommendation made by officers who work so hard to meet all the conflicting needs.
Thank you. Right, we move to members now for questions, please.
May I ask a...
Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chair. The objectors have mentioned the wall, both in terms of it marking a boundary, which I accept is going to be marked going forward by railings if this application is approved. But they've also talked about pollution affecting water bees, blown litter, car particulates and car emissions. The wall, it is said, protects people in Watermeads from these nuisances. Could the planning officer please comment on whether the wall is an effective barrier, and if it is indeed an effective barrier, what is being proposed to stop this nuisance going forward if these plans are approved?
You say affected barrier. So in terms of its archaeological and its historic setting, yes, it's the boundary that has significant holds the weight. The wall itself is of no high amenity or archaeological value. So the replacement fully accords with the comments that have been made by Historic England and our conservation officer. What the railings, there's a condition again that requires applicants to provide details of that, and that will be essentially to try and make sure that it matches the railings of the adjoining and ensure that there is some value in terms of the quality of design, materials and appearance. In terms of the impact on noise and disturbance, I'd just like to draw members' attention to the PAC report, which looks at the consultation comments. Our environmental health officer have made no objections and have accepted the scheme. There is obviously, like any road on a highway, and there's going to be some elements of noise and disturbance, but one of the conditions, the condition 6, looks at is trying to ensure that the tree planting that's provided is adequate. And again, in line with London Plan Policy 7.12, which talks about the right place, the right tree for the right setting. So and that looks at the type of the trees in terms of ensuring that it has adequate enough foliage to ensure that, you know, over a period of time, there's significant growth and could avoid some of those disturbances and pollution that we've seen has been raised.
Thank you. Councillor Southgate.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe blindingly obvious, but there is a footbridge just to the west of the road bridge. I remember Councillor Draper opening that, I think, when he was mayor. Will remain. That's unaffected by this.
So yes, correct. The footbridge on the west side is unaffected by this.
Yeah,
correct.
yeah. Thank you.
Further questions? Yes, Councillor David Dean.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you tell me what the current width of each lane will be versus what the current width of each lane is currently for traffic? Did you get what I said then?
Councillor Awat, rather, can you, yeah.
Sorry, I was just
unmute. Okay, that would be helpful.
So the scheme has been designed in accordance with the highway standards. So the existing width of the highway, the proposed is slightly larger than what's currently available there at the moment, and that's purely just to look at servicing issues and so on. So yeah, it's a replacement that is much larger than what we've got at the moment, slightly larger than what we've got at the moment. The highway officer, the transport engineers have been instrumental in the design of the application, commenting at pre-apps and so on. So yeah, it meets the standards.
Yes.
You're muted. I can't hear you, Councillor Dean.
Somebody's muted me.
Wasn't me.
I trust you. I'm just wondering the difference between what it was, or what it was, and what it is. That's all. Is it a metre wider? Is it 2 meters wider? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it's less than a metre wider. Yes.
Okay. And just to follow up, so the footpath that where there isn't a cycle lane, can you tell me how wide that footpath is?
So the footpath is the footpath on the existing footpath.
I don't think it is an existing footpath. So
the existing
it's
footpath.
one side without the cycle lane.
Okay, so the shared pedestrian cycle lane is 3 meters.
Okay, and currently, what's your planning guidelines on how wide a footpath should be? Is it 2 meters, isn't it?
Yeah, so 2 meters would be adequate for a footpath. A shared footpath in terms of the healthy streets looks at 3 meters should be for shared footpath and pedestrian cycle. That's the standard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have just a third question then.
Sure.
So if the carriageway was the same width as it was before, then you've got collectively 4 meters of width. And if a footpath needs to be 2 meters, I understand that cycle lanes also need to be 2 meters.
Yeah.
Could you consider making the 4 meters a cycle path on one side and a footpath on the other?
Cycle lane of one path and a foot. So essentially you're saying that to have 2 separate cycle lanes using some of the
on the basis that people cycling north will go on the left-hand side and people cycling south will go on their left-hand side, essentially, that they stay on the right side of the road for the cycling.
Yeah.
So because the footpath at the moment, or before the bridge had its little issue, was less than 2 meters wide. So if you extended the footpath to 2 meters, that's within your expectations as highways. And a cycling lane is also 2 meters, and the carriageway was the same width as it is today, and the same orientation is what you're telling me. There's no issue there, is there?
Yeah, I mean, there would be. I mean, at the moment, it's all about trying to ensure that there's a betterment and an improvement. And if in current today's practices and in the London Plan, Healthy Streets and Department of Transport's guidances, trying to squish everything together wouldn't be creating safe spaces, and it certainly wouldn't be safe for pedestrians or cyclists or people using a wheelchair. So trying to create a tight net, at the moment the design works and fits for that purpose because it creates cycle and pedestrian access on one route, which is in accordance with the guidances, as we mentioned, Healthy Streets and Department of London Transport note, and there's a separate cycle lane. So essentially there is 5 cycle provision on that. So it's a question of whether it needs to be, because if you've got 5 cycle lanes going over a bridge and then compromise further the access for pedestrians, I don't consider that would be justified in planning policy terms. Yeah.
Any other questions, please? Councillor McGrath.
Yes, can I just ask about the Green Spaces Officer, who in 519 clearly has a different view about the trees. How often is it that a recommendation comes forward overruling a different recommendation from the Green Spaces Officer?
Okay.
What?
So yes, that's a good question, Councillor. Thank you for pointing that out. I just want to make things something very clear. It's green spaces. We on site discussed impact and potential impact. There is no impact. Lots of trees. Everyone's entitled to their views. Green spaces will come at it from a view that's from green spaces, and particularly on trees. A planning officer has to look at it: the flood risk, the ecology, the trees, the heritage. So if I just took the views of the green spaces, I would go in conflict with all those. So it's about drawing everything on balance. And so discussing with the Green Spaces Officer, yes, I took his views on board, and we revisited the site, and it mentioned that the caveat assessment should be taken. I disagreed with that because it's against policy. Policy states the British Standard 5837 2012 should be applied in assessing impact of development on trees. So clearly the views that he's expressed weren't in line with policy. So I disagree with that. And the impact on the existing trees, the ecology, the arboriculturist report that was submitted, the arboriculturist LBM, the Art Council's tree officer looked at the report, agreed that the replacement would be sufficient and acceptable, and actually in line with London Plan policies and our policies. So yes, there are opinions, and they're valued opinions, but we have to be able to draw it on balance. And if we just take that opinion on board, we then have an impact on the heritage assets and the flood risk and everything else. And we wouldn't be having a discussion around cycle lane because the wall would be there and there would be no active travel or an encouragement to provide sustainable forms of transport. So once you're trying to do one thing, you can have an affect another. It's about how you draw the balance and assess applications in regards to policy and guidance, and officers done that to the best.
Fair enough, but just back to my question: how often is it that the Green Spaces Officer
not very often
overruled?
Can I ask a question about pedestrians and disabled people? Is the space that's allocated considered to be compliant? Could you talk about that?
Very good question. Okay, so one of the guidances that we have from the mayor is it's I've got it here actually. It looks at the Safe Streets for London, and that talks about the Road Safety Action Plan for London, and that's published this year, actually 2020. And so the scheme will need to be in compliance with that. And one of the conditions in the informatives that's on there is to ensure that the applicants provide the adequate type of road markings, the signages, and so on, to ensure that our users in our borough can actively use the spaces. People on wheelchair, disadvantaged, people push ramps, all pedestrians as well as cyclists with all needs of mobility will be able to access it. So yeah, the scheme will be designed in line with that, the mayor's guidance.
Thank you. David Dean.
So the current wall, just looking at this, the paperwork here, as you were saying, the bridge will be the same size. That means that the wall doesn't have to be demolished, does it? There's no reason to demolish it because the bridge is not expanding?
Well, so following the applicants that took public consultation sometime in August, about 90% of the comments that have come back are saying, well, we've got an opportunity here to have modern cycle lanes that meet our policy standards and London Plan and the Mayor's and the Department of Transport strategy. To be able to do that, you can't do that with a wall in place. The wall has to be moved in terms of getting this appropriate level of appropriate access for cycle and into that area. So yeah, with the wall in place, we will not be able to achieve.
But did you say it's the same width? I'm sorry, did you earlier say it's going to be the same width? Isn't the bridge going to be the same width as it is today? Is that what you said earlier?
Yeah, so the bridge would be widened slightly on the west side.
So it's not going to be the same width, it's going to be wider?
Yeah.
The bridge will be wider, yes. I said the bridge will be wider, yes.
And it's going to be widened on to where the wall is currently?
Yeah.
It's slightly, yeah, it'll be widened across. So it'll be a metre closer to the footbridge.
Okay, all right.
Right. Any further questions before we move to comments? Okay, comments, please. Do you have anyone wishing to comment? Yes, Councillor Stephen Crow.
Thank you, Chair. Initially, I thought this was a very straightforward application because it seems axiomatic that a bridge has been collapsed and it must be replaced by a new bridge. And then I started to think to myself, well, it should be a better bridge, something that will last for 150 years or more. So it's very important that we get this right. And then when I look at the photographs in the report, the kind of photographs of how the bridge will look, I think to myself, well, where's the sustainable transport? Where are the cycle lanes? Where's the segregated pavements? And just looking at the photographs, it just seems to me that this bridge isn't wide enough. And it should be a wider, modern bridge suited for the next 150 years. Now, there are difficulties because we have National Trust land on one side and the water meads on the other, and there are trees. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I look at this bridge and I think, or the proposed bridge, and I just think it's not fit for the 21st century, let alone the 22nd century. We need a modern bridge, 2 lanes of traffic, 2 cycle lanes, 2 segregated pedestrian pavements. So on that basis, I'm kind of minded to reject, but I will be pleased to hear the views of colleagues.
Councillor Henry.
I'm just commenting from what Councillor Crowe said. So are you saying to get the bridge much wider, they need to cut some more trees?
Well, I think that might be an inevitable consequence, but the point I'm trying to make is that a bridge has got to last 150, 200 years, and it's got to be fit for purpose. And sadly, that might mean tree loss. I hope it doesn't, but these are the difficult decisions we have to make.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dean.
I seem to lose the logic on the width. Initially, we were talking about saying the width hasn't changed, and Councillor Southgate asked the question about the footpath, which remains. And then we were told that the width has changed, but it's pushing the bridge towards the footpath, i.e. the span from, if I'm coming from the south, the span is still exactly the same because the footpath starts where it did before on the west side of the bridge, and the bridge finishes on the east side as it did before. So I can't understand, if the width is identical, firstly, why any trees are being felled at all. I don't think that's been explained in the slightest. There should be no trees being taken down. I think the second thing is, we've got a carriageway which is wider, but we've no reason why the carriageway is wider. It's not because the current one flouts any guidelines. And cyclists will say time and again when it comes to active travel that they prefer segregation. And whilst I'm absolutely no expert at all, I can see why cyclists prefer segregation from vehicles. And if the total width of the bridge has been widened enough to add in enough space for 4 additional meters, as in a footpath of 2 meters, which is standard practice for the council, and a cycle lane for 2 meters, which is standard practice for the council, I can't see why we haven't got a cycle lane on one side of the bridge. Instead, we have a shared surface for the pedestrians and the cycles. And that's not about throwing out the design. That's just about moving the white lines, but keeping within the guidelines. I don't agree with losing the bridge. I think it's rustic. I think it's historic. I would hope that somebody would think about putting it somewhere else because it's an emotional tie. And of course, we could demolish everything old. We could demolish all the hospitals and schools if we wanted and build on all the parks if we want. But sometimes people like what they've had before and they like the look of it. And I think rather than just having a modern bridge, they should be able to look at something and feel comfortable with it. But I want to see the officers come back and change the carriageway. So there is a segregated cycleway on both sides, which is absolutely possible without any restrictions at all, and a footpath on both sides, which will also meet the guidelines. Otherwise, I just don't think this is right, considering what Councillor Crowe said in terms of if this is here for 100 years, this is the chance to get it right.
Thank you. If there are any further comments, Councillor Southgate. You have to unmute yourself, please. Councillor Southgate, can you unmute yourself, please? I can't hear you. Can't hear you. I can't. Councillor Southgate, I can't hear you.
Shall I ask my question while Councillor Southgate?
No, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Southgate, can you please unmute yourself? Are you able to do that, Louise?
I'm sorry.
Right, okay. Please,
yes,
can we all pay attention to the unmute button, please, because
Yeah.
it will take up time. Thank you.
Yeah. Apologies. Yes, I know the bridge is very old. It's has 3 arches. It's to be replaced by a single span bridge. So that is going to work a lot better in terms of presenting fewer barriers or obstacles to flow, particularly as you know, after heavy rainfall, which was part of the problem before. So in terms of how bridges should work, it is an improvement on what we had before. Okay, it's not Foster and Partners, but it is quite a light, straightforward design. I personally quite like the railings replacing the wall. The wall is neither statutorily nor locally listed. Its significance is only where it is, not its actual physical presence. I note too that the police guidance actually is for the removal of the wall, improving surveillance and general perceptions of safety. So in that respect, the wall does not serve a useful purpose. My question about the footbridge really was just to ensure that that alternative option for pedestrians will remain, and I think many of us have been using that pretty heavily over the past few months as we walk up and down the Wandle Trail. So on balance, I think the design works well, and I would be keen to support it.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath, I'm not taking further questions. We're on comments now. Was yours a comment?
Yes, it was. Apologies, okay. I misspoke. My concern about this is I think similar to Councillor Crowe, which is you know, this is going to be here for a long time. We're being told that it's very important to get this through tonight because the residents are suffering great inconvenience, which very clearly they are. But that doesn't seem to me that that should be a reason for not having as good a bridge as we can. And I'm not yet convinced that there aren't opportunities to have a better bridge than the one we've got for the next 100 odd years.
Okay, thank you. If no further comments, I'm going to move to the vote, please. Councillor Joan Henry.
Chair, I'd just like to say I've listened to everyone, and in life we go through many changes, and I can understand the passion and compassion and everything that everyone have for this bridge. But I think it's important that we look and understand that we're going through a very challenging time right now, and the best thing is to provide a bridge. It lasts over 100 years, a bridge which is user friendly for everyone. Also, I got quite a lot of emails about cutting trees. At the end of the day, we all love our trees, but at the end of the day, there will be more tree plants. And I think we should go ahead and, you know, let this bridge go through, because I mean, for me, it becomes a passion for me also. And I need to see it. I have to use that area. And it's very difficult. Sometimes our children have to go to school, sometimes late for school. So committee, I'd like you to look at it carefully and we approve this application.
Okay, we're going to move to the vote now. Can I just say, first of all, I'd like to see a show of hands, but we are going to be recording the vote. So Louise will be doing that through a voting mechanism, which I think we're all familiar with now. So first of all, we'll take a show of hands and then we will go through the voting mechanism. Okay, can I see those in favour, please, of the recommendations, please show. And please keep your hand steady. And those against? And not voting. Okay, and now that will be taken, that vote will now come through electronically. Thank you. So 70% for, 30% against, and 0 not voting. So we close the. So the recommendation is approved. We're now going to move to agenda item 8, which is the 16 to 20 Morden Road.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Firstly, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I will just share my screen as well and talk you through the plans. If you bear with me momentarily. Okay, and can you see the screen now?
Can see the screen, but can't see anything on it. Yep. So, well, it flashed a map and then it went off.
Okay. You should be able to see a site plan. That's what I've got up on mine.
No, can't see it.
Okay. Bear with me. I shall send it to share again. And
yes, can see it now.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you. This is the site. 16 to 20 Morden Road. You have South Wimbledon Tube Station here, and this is the High Path estate, which is due for regeneration in the near future. In terms of the character of the area, we have Spur House here, a commercial at ground floor, residential above at 9 stories, the existing building at 3 stories, 4 stories here, and then moving down to 3 and 2 stories as you get further away from the more commercial Kingston Road and Merton High Street over to this side. I'll take you through the existing plans fairly quickly because it will really be the elevations which give you an idea of the existing site layout. But here you can see ground floor. The building is vacant and has been for some time, but it was previously a bank with ancillary offices on the 2 floors above. The access road comes in from the main road here with a turning head leading to a car park, and there's a mature tree on site to the rear there also. These are the upper floors, which simply show ancillary offices and a terrace on the back. In terms of elevations, this is what you would see from the front. So a mansard roof here, and then spur house to the right. And from the rear, the same but reversed. This is the current proposal. It's for a Part 5, Part 6-storey building to provide 26 flats. Page 140, the proposal is set out in detail, but to run you through it quickly, you can see the back part of the building is marginally lower than the front part. I'll come on to that later. That's in an effort to avoid an impact on neighbouring amenity. This is the rear part of the building, so you can see this recessed top floor there, and then enclosures to the rear windows. I'll take you through some plans, elevations which include colour, because that will make it much easier to visualise it. So here you can see the existing street scene with Spur House over here, Falcon House here, and the proposed scheme in here. Light and dark grey brick with projecting window frames. This is the ground floor layout, so you can see the footprint of the building here, roughly in the same position as the existing building. It moves a wall's width further back here, and the frontage is stepped back very slightly compared to the existing building. There'd be a car park in here for free disabled spaces only, an area of communal space, and this would be refuse storage and air source heat pumps. There'd be 3 units on the ground floor, which would be fully dual aspect. The entrance from the rear would take you to the bike store, and the entrance from the front would take you into the main lobby and lifts and stairs. Taking you through the materials, as I mentioned, the light grey and the dark grey brick there. This was a building that the applicant has referred to. Bear with me, because this page seems to still be loading. Is it also the case that this is a white screen for what you're seeing?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I think that's just a matter of the document taking time to catch up. So bear with me. What I hope to do is come back to that page, because I think that's the upper floors. A basement would be provided to house the ancillaries and servicing of the proposed building. This is a more close-up view of the ground floor, so you can see bedrooms to the rear, living spaces to the front, but also single smaller bedrooms to the front there as well. This is a typical this is the layout of the first to fourth floor plan. So you can see on the side here, we have a through unit. These smaller units here, the 1-bedroom units, would be single aspect, and that is discussed in the report. And from the roof, another communal garden area, and these would be non-accessible sedum roofs. And then with indicative solar panels above. The scheme has been amended quite heavily since its first inception. Here you can see a 3D view of the building as first submitted, which had white render and copper effect to the overrun of the lift shaft. That was something which was resisted by officers, and you'll see the DRP comments in relation to that scheme are fairly negative. But as I say, the scheme has moved on some way from there. This was the originally proposed scheme. Just so you're aware of what it is. It kept the car park more in its existing form with the enclosures over here. In terms of the visuals of the surrounding area, bear with me. This is the application building with Spur House beyond. You can see that in a wider street scene view. This is Falcon House to the left or south, 4-storey building. This is the car park to the rear, where you can see the rear of Spur House and the residential units which face into the car park. The residential dwellings behind the site, 2-storey dwellings here, which are front here and also have an outlook to the back. Again, you can see those more clearly, and the existing tree on site, which is due to be retained. And that's the view of the existing back of the building. While I talk you through it, I'll take you through to the plans of the current proposal again. I would also draw your attention to the update sheet, the mod sheet, which deals with additional objections received, but also includes a breakdown of the comments of the design review panel, what the changes to this scheme have been, and the officer response to that. To summarise, officers consider that the scheme has responded well to the comments of the DRP, and they've made significant changes to overcome those concerns. Granted, we still have a residential use at ground floor, which isn't ideal, but you'll see that in the report, officers don't consider that there'd be a reasonable policy-based justification for resisting this use at ground floor. Taking you through the various planning issues, as you'll be aware, there's an ongoing need for housing, and that's attributed weight in the report. You'll note at paragraph 7.4 onwards that the scheme doesn't provide any affordable housing contribution. That has gone through an external viability consultant who has indicated that even a scheme on well, it's a long way off being viable, I suppose would be the way to describe it. So what they're indicating is that even a 100% market use wouldn't be viable in theory. This is something we have pressed our external viability consultant on, but unfortunately, due to the residual land value of the site, given its fairly high public transport accessibility level, it does have a high residual value, and that's the reason for lack of affordable housing. As I say, in terms of the design, the building's considered to strike the right balance in terms of a transition down from the higher spur house to the more residential buildings. If I take you back to the site plan, the buildings at Footpath Estate here are due to be 9 stories at around 32 metres. This building here is around 30 metres, and the proposal being around 20. The spacing of windows and the fenestration and the materials are considered to respond well to the local context, whereas the previous scheme didn't respond well to the local context. It could have been anywhere, and as a number of people commented, the roof was not something that reflected the local character and was more akin to a leisure centre. So that has been completely abandoned, that approach. You'll see at paragraph 7.5.17 response to DRP comments also, but that is also set out in a table format in the mod sheet, and I apologise for the formatting in that. I think the copying of it somehow threw the table out. In terms of the impact on neighbouring amenity, the key impacts are to the rear. You have the residential dwellings here and the newer apartments as part of Spur House. The report deals with this at paragraph 7.6. You'll see the separation distance to the rear is considered sufficient to avoid a materially harmful overlooking impact. Whilst there would be some marginal loss of daylight and sunlight to the first floor windows here, we have asked for a daylight and sunlight analysis, which we consider demonstrates that impact would not be materially harmful. Members will have to weigh up that very limited harm, which officers don't consider as materially harmful, versus the benefit of the proposal. Concerns have been raised from residents of Falcon House here and also Spur House, as well as residents to the rear here. But as you can see, given the separation distances, the step down of the building to the rear and the orientation, it's considered that an objection on neighbouring amenity couldn't reasonably be substantiated. Also, it's worth noting that on a road such as this, it's likely that there will be pressure for this building to be higher in the future. It would be quite unusual to insist it remained at a very low height on the basis of residential amenity at this distance. Moving on to other matters, transport and parking. There's 3 spaces for disabled users, which is in line with London Plan standards, and the refuse collection arrangements would be acceptable. In terms of sustainability, we have conditions to ensure that the relevant targets will be met, and the application is accompanied by an energy and sustainability statement. Part of the legal agreement will be to secure permit-free parking. Will be that the residents cannot be eligible to apply for permits, and all residents will have 3 years free car club membership. We're also including a clause in the legal agreement if there's any potential uplift in profit, a review mechanism in there. And therefore, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions and that legal agreement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Can I call on Mark Goodson, please?
Yes, hello. Thank you, Chair, and good evening. My name is Mark Goodson, and I act on behalf of my clients, Meritune Management Falcon Limited, who are the freeholders of Falcon House at number 26 Morden Road, which is a block of 23 flats, being immediately adjacent to the proposed development. Whilst we've previously written to object to the proposed developments, my clients have asked me to highlight the following points. Point one is the proposed block of flats would be 6 stories high and would be located forward of Falcon House, which is only 4 stories high. Because of the proposed disparity in height and siting forward of the building line of Falcon House, the proposed development would have a dominant and detrimental impact on the occupiers of Falcon House in terms of overlooking and loss of light to windows on the northern elevation, many of which serve habitable rooms. Point two, the development would also be significantly out of scale with Falcon House due to this height difference. This is, I believe, illustrated on drawing number P-09C, showing the proposed front elevation street view. Point three, the proposed development would have windows to habitable rooms, such as bedrooms and living rooms, in its flank elevation facing Falcon House, which, coupled with its siting and height, would mean there would be significant potential for overlooking of windows in both the side and front elevations of Falcon House, to the serious detriment of residents of Falcon House, which have many windows to habitable rooms in the flank and front elevation of all floors. Point four, we believe the development has only one staircase, which would be a significant problem in the event of a fire. Point five, in a development of 30 flats in an area where no on-street parking is currently available, no parking is provided other than 4 spaces which are reserved for blue badge holders. It is inconceivable to think that the residents of the 30 flats would not have any vehicles. Maintaining the security of Falcon House car park for the use of its residents without any physical barriers would become almost impossible. This would inevitably lead to residents and visitor parking in the car park for Falcon House. Point number 6, there is concern that has not been addressed about the development oversailing under the ownership of Falcon House, i.e. the accessway and footway, in terms of projecting windows. This must be addressed, we believe, before any permission could be potentially granted. Also, no party wall has been served at present.
Sorry to cut you short there.
Sorry.
Can I call on Sarah Sharp, please?
Mute. Okay. The plans are grim, grey, prison-like, but it's housing. I can almost hear 2 councillors, especially in this chamber, say, we need more housing. And I agree, we need more housing, but housing that improves people's lives, not sticks residential on the ground floor, right by one of the most polluted roads in the ward. And guess what? Ironically, these ground floor flats are especially wheelchair accessible, so it's for the vulnerable. Yes to housing, but not one that mostly provides units with 1 window for the entire flat, not in the 21st century. and yes to housing, but not that few can afford. This application offers no affordable housing. It's mind-boggling why the developer zoomed in on the two poorest architectural anomalies on Morden Road, Spur House and metal-clad Madison Heights, to clone his own equally poor quality new development in this prominent site. We can't improve people's lives and housing stock if we keep imitating poor quality developments. Merton planners need to listen to their own urban designer and apply policies London Plan 7.4, 7.6, CS14, DMD2, the NPPF, which all require well-designed developments of the highest architectural quality, appropriate to context, relating positively to the appearance, scale, proportions, using high-quality materials to promote the character of the area and encourage placemaking. And these plans fail miserably, in my opinion, and I urge you to reject them. South Wimbledon is rich in terracotta brick and history. It's designated a local centre in the draft local plan, and I urge you to give this weight, in spite of the officer's report saying not to. It's true that draft local plan hasn't been approved, but this chamber approved 1 to 4 Francis Grove on the yet unapproved planning document. We need consistency. The officer's report says these plans now comply with the DRP, but look closely, not that much has changed since the red verdict or the urban designer's views. The developer removed the dated curved roof as suggested, but the lift shaft is still on the facade and creates a dead frontage. They said the ground floor itself, not just the bedrooms at the front, was too hostile in environment for residential use, in spite of the building being slightly set back from the busy and polluted A129. The plans remain marginally the same. The number of single aspect units is high. There are 12 fully dual and effectively 17 single aspect. Of those, the officer suggests 8 are almost dual because they have a wide window and a side window. But where are these side windows? Are they frosted? They can't be found in the application.
This is your third.
They've suddenly materialized to make us believe those 8 flats are now dual aspect after being single aspect in the previous plans. The materials are appalling. The grey brick and grey aluminium windows are funerary and utterly out of context. High Path Regen across the road is using London's stock yellow brick and incorporating more of South Wimbledon's historic character and its contemporary design. The poor quality development has a detrimental impact on the appearance of the area, but most importantly, its internal layout disadvantages the well-being of future residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call on Edward Ledwidge, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to address the committee tonight. My name is Edward Ledwidge. I'm a partner at Montague Evans. I represent the owners of the site, and I just, without reiterating really what's within the officer's report and the supplement sheet, I just like to run through a few points, headlines, and then address some of the objectors' concerns. So we represent the owners of the site. Actually, they were the original developers of the site, built for full occupation by Barclays. It's been vacant for a little while now. The Barclays lease came to an end, and they didn't wish to carry on the site. Therefore, they vacated. And given the age of the building and the change in the area, we've looked to the opportunity to redevelop the site and to optimize it in terms of its ability to contribute to housing requirement. So we've extensively consulted with your planning officers and design officers through the pre-application service. The application was submitted and we presented to the design review panel, further to some concerns that were raised by Paul Garrett on the design front. As a result of that process, there were quite significant changes made to the scheme. They are summarised in the officer's report and the update sheet quite clearly. So I won't go through them in absolute detail, but the changes were significant. And I mean, we've heard discussion around the roof form, and that was deemed to be a slightly dated approach to the building and the design. So what we're asked to do is look at what had been consented on the High Path scheme opposite the site and draw reference from that, and hence the redesign of the roof form and the elevations and material palette which is the scheme that's before you tonight. So there has been a significant change in response to those issues in order to get to a position where we've got a consensus over what is regarded to be a high quality piece of development. In terms of dual aspect, we were asked also to review the amount of dual aspect within the scheme. The original submission was for 30 flats, and that's as a result of the redesign and looking to maximise dual aspect, has reduced to 26 in number. And on a building of this size with one lift core and one stair core, you can only do so much in terms of creating dual aspect units. So, but the percentage was reduced from 70% single aspect down to 30% single aspect, and those single aspect units are one bed, one person units, and none of those are north facing. The ground floor has been also mentioned. There is an opportunity here to provide residential at ground floor. There is precedent for that in the area. There's no policy protection on the existing commercial use. There are significant concerns over creating commercial space in this location. The owner of the building is actually primarily a commercial portfolio holder, hence the original development, and they would have serious concerns about the lettability of any commercial space here at ground floor. But I mean, notwithstanding that, there is the ability to have ground floor residential accommodation here, which is designed well. There's defensible space at the front, which has been improved since the original submission on suggestion of the design review panel and the design officer. So that has been addressed. I mean, those units do actually also enable us to provide, up to 3-bedroom accommodation. There's three bed units at the ground floor. They've got their own front doors. They've got their own private gardens. They're suitable for families, and they're also adaptable for those with mobility problems. So, whilst I'm sure you'll have your opinions as to the suitability of residential in that location, there are, it does enable us to deliver, some units which meet specialist requirements. And as I say, there is residential at ground floor immediately adjacent to this site and opposite, so it's not unusual for this setting. The parking in the amenity space has been improved considerably, reducing down to 3 parking spaces only for disabled occupiers and with some communal amenity space. So, I mean, they were the changes, and really kind of moving to, what we're providing as part of the development. I mean, we've got a mix of units here, 1, 2 and 3 bed, high quality, all in accordance with the design standards. They've got private amenity space to each and communal amenity space. The parking, which I've talked to, and energy efficiency is there in terms of the building fabric and additional measures, the S-Force heat pump and provision
this is your 30-second warning
for PV. Just in terms of the point that was raised and overlooking, those windows in the flank elevation of the property facing Falcon House, they're secondary windows which serve the kitchen diner space, and they can be fixed shut, they can be obscured, they're not an overlooking issue. So that is quite clear. If you read the elevations and you read the layout plans,
your time's up, sorry.
You can understand that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to have a statement from, actually, let me ask first of all, Tim, to come back and comment on any of the issues that were raised there. Would you like to come back on any of those?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Okay, so starting with the first objectors' comments, referring to north-facing windows not receiving as much light. Appreciated these are north-facing windows, so they will be receiving less light than obviously other windows, and they are side-facing. In terms of overlooking to these windows, we do have a recommended condition for obscure glazing. That can be up to 1.7 meters internally, potentially. So it would still allow light in, but just not an outlook over directly next to over to those properties. In terms of one staircase for fire, The applicant has provided details to indicate that this would meet building control standards for fire. This isn't generally something which would be looked at the planning stage, but the Emerging London Plan does allow us to do that. We have asked for a fire strategy by condition. Now you'll note that that's a fairly new thing that we're asking for, but this will cover and ensure that it meets those standards. In terms of the parking, this is an area of virtually the highest public transport accessibility level you can get. So if we were directing a car-free development anywhere, it would be here along a bus route next to a tube station. So I don't think it is inconceivable that there would be lots of residents with cars, particularly if where you're buying your property or renting, you know that there isn't parking available. In terms of other people parking without a physical barrier to use the neighbouring car park, I hear where they're coming from in terms of these concerns, but this would just be day-to-day management of the car park, in the same way that if commuters suddenly started turning up and using this car park, you know, there are means and methods to ensure that people don't park on land that isn't owned by them, which fall short of refusing this planning application. In terms of oversailing of the accessway, I'm not sure if that related to a previous scheme which had oriel angled bay windows here. In any event, from what the application has shown is that all the development would be within the applicant's ownership. I would just point out though that this is a separate matter to granting planning permission. If there is a land ownership issue, that would run separately to the planning permission. Planning permission doesn't convey an ultimate right to develop if there are other legal obstacles. But from what I can see, it looks to be entirely within the red line site area. A party wall act, again, isn't a requirement for a party for a planning application. Given the separation distance to Falcon House, I don't know on what basis it would be needed. It may be that the foundations would come further across this access road. It's not something I could comment on directly, other than to say it's not a material planning consideration. Moving on to the second objector's comments. There are units which are dual aspect by virtue of a side window. You'll see in the report that it does explain that, and it does go through to explain which ones are sort of side and front, and which ones are full through dual access, dual aspect. I would point out that whilst dual aspect front and back is nice to have, you can't appreciate it in terms of there was no spot in the house where you'll stand where you get light from both sides. So provided that the rooms themselves are adequately lit, that would be a key point that we'd be looking at. Going up the building, you can see these are the single aspect units. So whilst they are single aspect, there are no flats which are served by one single window. You have your out window here and a winter balcony and window there. In terms of the input for the development, as I said, this at first wasn't something that officers were supportive of. They did have the applicant did have a steer to pick some design cues from the adjacent development, and that is what they have done. And I think it's fair to say that it's not a similar appearance. The projecting lift overrun here in the original scheme was very dominant. That simply isn't the case in this current scheme. If I take you back to the elevations. Sorry, bear with me. Right, I seem to have lost the connection with it, so I'll carry on talking. There's one comment I'd just like to pick up. The agent had mentioned that all the single aspect units would only be one bed, one person units. Whilst that is the case, the studio units would be single aspect. Just to clarify, so the one bed, two person units would also be the single aspect units. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could Louise please read the statement from Councillor Bembo?
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the idea of new residential development at the disused Barclays Bank site on Morden Road. However, I will not hesitate to say from the start of the statement that the proposed planning application is a badly designed and poor quality building that I do not wish to see in my ward, Abbey, South Wimbledon. You all will have read from tonight's PAC documentation that the design review panelists didn't like the pre-application earlier this year and was given a rejection. I understand today's proposals have been slightly amended, but why bypass the DRP's stage for a second review, but directly submitted to the council and now has the planner's recommendation for approval? Why? It seems to me that it has been rushed through, and has any public consultation taken place? No, of course not. Just another residential block ruining the landscape of South Wimbledon. No creative thoughts were given to the building fitting into our local community, but it has an adverse impact on the character of South Wimbledon. The proposed residential block would be 6 stories high, containing 26 units. The building appearance would be very unappealing, finished in light grey and dark grey facing brickwork with projected window frames in dark grey coated aluminium. It is not high quality architecture, but it is poor quality design. The development only has 1 staircase, which would be a significant problem in the event of a fire. Only 4 parking spaces are proposed at the rear, but no on-street parking is available. This would inevitably lead residents and visitors parking in the neighbouring car park belonging to Falcon House. No provision has been made in the application as to how this would be prevented. The proposed development would have a dominant and detrimental impact on the occupiers of Falcon House in terms of overlooking and loss of light to windows, many of which serve habitable rooms. The development would have windows facing Falcon House. Residents living in Spur House, right-hand side of the proposed development, are deeply concerned about the potential loss of light affecting their homes. This building will impact the skyline in our community with another high-rise block of flats and is becoming a common feature in Wimbledon. The council's urban design officer said the appearance and architecture cannot be described as high quality. It is unambitious, dated, and does not derive from any good local context. Why no objections from the environmental health officer, highways officer, and transport officer? The location of air source heat pumps will create a significant noise for the residents, damaging the aesthetics and the living environment. I find it laughable to read that the whole of Merton is an air quality management area, section 7.11. It shows how little is known about the air quality in South Wimbledon. And mark my words, as a long-term resident, there are no signs of a reduction in traffic-related emissions. It is susceptible to antisocial behaviour at the rear of the development. Comments from the police stated the need for controlled access doors, cycle storage, defensible space around windows, design of air source heat pump enclosure to eliminate misuse by climbing, the need for a CCTV system and lighting. Have the planners taken these comments on board? This development will increase human traffic to the area, which already has 3 new developments: Spur House, Topham Yard and Madison Heights. Having said the above, I strongly urge the PAC panelists.
Second warning.
I strongly urge the PAC panelists to reject this bad design, which would not enhance the appearance of the building in our community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ellie Stringer, please.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. And I'm also speaking as a ward councillor. And I'd like to raise a couple of questions about this application, but I am overall in favour of building more homes in my ward. And I personally admire the design, and I've received no complaints from residents about that aspect. I'm also supportive of us building car-free developments where properties like this one are right by the tube station and multiple bus routes. I do have concerns on a couple of points about it not contributing to 2 of our policies, the forthcoming local plan and our affordable homes policy. It's unfortunate that this is being decided just before the local plan is being finalised. As the planning report makes clear, the draft local plan proposes South Wimbledon Junction as a designated local centre, which would come with responsibilities to support shops, services and businesses, particularly those that serve the needs of local residents, and to support measures that enhance the street scene. So had this application been coming later next year and the local plan was approved, would we have expected more from it in terms of its contribution to the local business and retail sector and the public realm? So are we able to consider additional requirements from the developer to hold them to maximising the impact on the public realm in particular? There's some soft landscaping proposed at ground floor level, but could we be more ambitious? The other aspect that disappoints me is the lack of affordable housing. This is situated at the heart of one of the most deprived wards at Wimbledon. I understand the assessment that 40% affordable housing target is not viable. But given that even on these viability assessments, even 100% private tenure isn't viable, this seems pretty ludicrous and would suggest that we can almost never deliver affordable housing on any Wimbledon developments. Are we really accepting that? Looking at some of these assumptions in the financial viability assessments, I think are questionable. So how come a site that is so close to useful transport links into London is worth less than, for example, Stage House, which is further away? And some of the build costs seem high compared to previous assessment on similar applications. I recognise that review on affordability is built in, and I would like this to be as strong as possible if we're going to approve this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Southgate. Councillor Southgate, you haven't unmuted.
Shush.
Right.
We're right, yes.
Yeah.
The amenity space, I note, for other than the ground floor units is just 6 metres, regardless of whether it's for a 2, 3 or 4 person flat. I mean, does that follow London plan guidelines?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you'll note that the balconies which are provided are all the same. However, that in addition to the communal amenity space is such that it would meet the targets. So if you're providing communal amenity space, there is no overriding need to provide private amenity space. In this case, they're providing a mixture of both. So whilst it might fall short by maybe 1 or 2 square meters on the balcony, it is then made up for in communal space. Sorry, I would show you that the plans aren't catching up in the form of the terrace, roof terrace and the garden to the rear. Thank you.
Councillor Henry.
Chair. I'd just like to ask the officer, please, would you be kind enough to explain or show us on the plan where the fire exits are, how many fire exits are there? Also, will there be a sprinkler in case of fire? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As I say, these are matters that would be dealt with at the building control stage. So it would be difficult for me to go into any sort of detail about whether there'd be sprinklers, because that's simply not something which is controlled at this stage. However, we have asked for a condition so that we can see how it will be done. In terms of fire exits, at the ground floor, it will be the front and back. Whether the lift will be a fire rated lift, as is something that can happen, as far as I understand from a layman's perspective. But I can't explain the fire strategy to you. It's not something that is covered in planning. But from what we've received, the applicants have indicated that what they're doing will be meeting building control standards. That will also be covered by building regulations, who would be the technical experts to assess that, rather than in this forum. We will seek advice from the building control team when discharging our condition on the fire strategy. But as it stands, I couldn't give you that level of detail, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lanning.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that the agent mentioned that 30% of the units will now be single aspect. And in the modifications sheet, there's a suggestion that the single lift core was the reason why more dual aspect units couldn't be accommodated. So my question is whether if the design were to be changed, would that facilitate more dual aspect? Would that be possible to essentially move where the lift core is?
Thank you. I mean, effectively, you have a square of land, and depending on how many lift cores you provide, that will provide access to each flat. As I pointed out earlier, the depth of the building is such that even if you do have dual aspect, you don't actually appreciate that in any single part of the building. So the dual aspect isn't necessarily the be all and end all in terms of the acceptability of the residential space that's being created. If you had more than one stairwell, you could potentially provide opportunities for more dual aspect units, although immediately it's not clear how you would deal with this depth of building in any event, no matter how many stair cores you have. What I would set out though is that whilst there may be better schemes that we could think up on the site, the scheme that we have is the one here before us, and officers would set out that to a reason for refusal based on the number of stair cores and the limited amount of single aspect units that there are wouldn't be reasonable in planning terms. Not only that, as it stands, the financial viability of the scheme has been indicated to already be low. And so I think if we were to come back and insist on a scheme that provided more stairwells and less residential space, then that may not be something that the developers could go with anyway. So it is a factor that it would result in more dual aspect were there more stair cores, but it is an on balance decision and recommendation that the officers have made in this regard. Thank you.
Councillor Dean.
Hello. Yeah, my follow up really is based on what Councillor Lanning is saying. This is my understanding that the current building is being demolished, so the opportunity is to build from the ground up. So the question really is, isn't it within planning guidelines, national guidelines, that apartments should be dual aspect? And the second question really is, being that it's a building that's 6 stories high, is it unusual that there is only one stairwell?
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, I don't know if it's that unusual for it to be one stairwell. The London plan would indicate that no more than 8 units should be served from one stair core per level, which this would comply with. So it falls within the guidelines for that. In terms of other guidance, the London Housing SPG does set out that north-facing single aspect units should be avoided, but that single aspect units in general should be minimised. But it doesn't indicate, there's no policy which says single aspect units are not permissible. It is based on the specifics of the scheme. And as I say, in this case, they are only the 1-bedroom units. They are east and west facing, they're not north facing. And the size of the window compared to the space that they would serve and the depth of apartment, you know, is fairly good for a single aspect unit. Thank you.
Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Macon.
You said earlier on about the fact that this is 6 stories high and there's no reason why they can't make it into 8 stories. If they made it into 8 stories, that would give them probably at least 6 more flats, which would enable them to put some affordable housing on the issue. And that's one question to the officer. And the other question is, why didn't they go back to the DRP after they'd done all the amendments?
Thank you. In terms of the building being higher, whilst you could argue that it might fit into the street scene adjacent to Spur House, the relationship with the properties to the rear is the main driving force in this. And that's why we have the building step down here in order to avoid an impact to properties at the rear. So that is probably why the applicant has come in at the scale of this. Well, it is definitely because we would have resisted it higher than this due to the impact on neighbouring amenities. So we have given them a steer in that sense. In terms of the DRP, it's not mandatory that cases go to the DRP, or that if they do get a red score that they go back again. It would be useful if it could have gone back to DRP and DRP could have categorically clarified that yes, this has overcome all the requirements, all the issues set out. You can see in the report that there have been meaningful changes to the scheme. Whilst it hasn't gone as far on every single aspect as we would have liked it to, we have to look at it in the round. And on balance, it's you know, it's a fairly good scheme. The lack of affordable housing is disappointing, but there's nothing we can reasonably do about that without risking costs at appeal. Again, in terms of the local plan and the new local centre, if we were to try and resist the application on that basis, there simply wouldn't be a policy there wouldn't be a policy basis, so that would be deemed as unreasonable behaviour. You know, we can't leave the application for an unspecified period of time until the policy changes, which would allow us to do something different. And I think that covers it. So thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, please? All right, we'll move to comments then, please. Councillor Southgate. Can you unmask? Can you unmute, please?
Okay, unmuted, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I detected in Mr. Lipscomb's responses here a lack of wholehearted enthusiasm, which I share. So can I just catalogue all the things that are wrong with this? And I'm sure I'll be told that taken in isolation, they are not sufficient grounds for turning it down, but I would suggest taken together, we really ought to consider whether we can let this go ahead. No affordable housing, Councillor Stringer regretted, and I'm sure we all do. 9 single aspect units, a further 8 are only semi-dual aspect. Private amenity space, very much below what we would seek, and it's really only the use of communal space which makes up that deficiency. It's way higher than the maximum recommended density, which would be 260 units per hectare. This is actually 337. But I think the real problem with it is the ground floor residential units, which are in fact in probably the most polluted spot in our borough, that South Wimbledon Junction. And we do have, particularly if these are intended for people with disabilities. And I would remind you that the particulate matter doesn't go away, it swirls around at ground level. So the thought of having to live in units, flats where you can't open the windows because of the amount of pollution outside your front door, and the lack of, I am conscious of other flats which let straight off the street at ground level. And every time I walk past them, I do feel we've made a mistake. Actually, it's not comfortable to have that degree of proximity to the passing public in an area of such high footfall. The other thing here, and we've been told that it would be unreasonable to hold it up on these grounds, but being unreasonable is what we can be good at. That South Wimbledon is destined to become a local centre. And it just seems to be very short-sighted to lose the opportunity to do something rather more adapting to that status. I'm obviously not recommending retail, but there could be all manner of maybe work units for the occupants of the flats, something that generates a community hub that we could just be passing up that opportunity. So all in all, I think that's my, oh, well, of course, the scathing comments from the design officer, the red verdict from the DRP, you can read through if you wish the extent to which you feel that the officers feel those have been addressed. I don't feel they have been fully addressed. So design weaknesses as well remain. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Makin.
So the biggest issue I've got is no affordable housing. If it was to be built in Mitchum or Morden, we'd be up in arms about that. Therefore, why can't Wimbledon have the same facilities? i.e., if we have to have affordable housing foisted on us in Mitchum, why can't we foist affordable housing on residents of Wimbledon? If that's the way to look at it. Because we're supposed to one borough, not two.
Thick. Good Lord. Yes, I think I think it's supposed to be something that you look forward to, isn't it? Affordable, not have it foisted on you. Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair. My thing is, having listened to what everyone have said and the officers, I believe that the safety of the occupants are not being met or will not be met. And also, you know, I think this is just for gain, but not for the occupants. And to be honest with you, I will not agree upon this application because there's no safety for whoever going to live into it.
Do you have any further comments here? Looking around. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I share the concerns about the lack of affordable housing, and I think we need to look very closely at the viability assessment and look at it again during the construction process if it goes ahead. I think we should be able to get at least some affordable housing into this block, and I'm not sure about the veracity of the assessment as it currently stands. However, all the other sort of objections that have been raised today, the fire and safety objections done by business, by building control later, and the fire brigade is involved, and that will be safe. There's plenty of blocks of this size with one stairwell if possible, and be safe. I haven't yet, notwithstanding Peter Southgate's, Councillor Southgate's interesting comments, I haven't yet heard a very good reason for turning this down. Even without affordable housing, we need new housing, especially housing which is car-free and close to public transport, this close to the tube station. People won't need a car most of the time. They can travel anywhere they like from the tube station, which is right on their doorstep. The design elements, while not perfect, and again, I keep saying this every meeting almost, it's not perfect, but I think it's good enough, and I haven't seen a good enough reason to turn it down. So I think we should pass this tonight and give it permission. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments? Okay, I'm going back to Councillor Southgate. Did you want to move a recommendation?
I do, Chair, and it is to reject on, forgive me if I don't quite pick the right phrasing here, but it's both the substandard or inadequate living conditions for the occupants, but also the design aspects. And I'm particularly unhappy about the ground floor residential units and the proximity to the street there. I just don't feel that will be a comfortable or appropriate living situation for the people who are expected to occupy those units. Affordable housing, I suspect we can't reject on those grounds because of the viability assessment, but we're all very uncomfortable about that, I sense. So really, it's the living conditions for the occupiers, and in particular the unacceptable living conditions for the ground floor units.
Neil, can I go to you for some clarification?
Yes, going through the issues that have been raised, certainly by Councillor Southgate, there were others raised, but I do note that you have restricted those three. Clearly, we do have policies around those, so we could potentially put together reasons for refusals around those three issues that have been raised. I'm just double checking. The other issues you raised went through affordable housing. The local plan process was mentioned. I take it you don't want to take that forward either, given the circumstances, and this officers have already explained why that can't be done at this particular time. But yes, those three reasons we could put together reasons for refusal.
Okay, so we have a recommendation. Can we just state those three reasons again, please, so that people are clear what they're voting on?
Yes, we've got the substandard living conditions. We've got the design and appearance of the building. And we've got specific issue around the ground floor and its proximity to the main road at the front, and therefore the living conditions.
And Chair, does that cover DMD too? Neil, does that?
Yes, it would do, yes.
It does.
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so those are the three conditions that we are concerned about in terms of this recommendation. Can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please?
That's to reject.
To reject this application, please can I see those in favour?
Oh, I'm going to lose it. Mm.
And those against? And not voting? Okay, now we have to record that electronically.
Might have got it. Exciting, though. Exciting. What? Whether I won the vote or not.
So refuse permission. So it sounds a little bit, can I just say it sounds a bit weird when it says to refuse permission, you're for refusing it or you're against refusing it. If you put for, it looks like, it sounds a bit weird. I don't know, is it me?
I don't know whether it's worth mentioning that I have a voting thing coming up. Is that an IT problem? I just want to make sure we don't have lots and lots of members of the public potentially voting.
Yes, you shouldn't have that.
Right, okay. Don't worry, I haven't voted.
Okay, I hope I'm putting my thing in the right box here. How are we doing? So to refuse permission, it was 60% for, 30% against, and 10% not voting. So the recommendation to refuse is approved. We're now going to move to agenda item 6, which is Melrose School.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Hello. Just share my screen.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is an application at Melrose School, which is on the south side of Church Road in Mitchum. The application has come before committee because it's a council site, and the application is also being made on behalf of the council. The current school is a special school for children aged from 11 to 16 with social, emotional, and mental health needs. It currently offers education to approximately 45 students. The school is entered and exited from a driveway from Church Road, which is where my cursor is. To the south is London Road playing fields. To the north are residential houses, as well as Hall Place, which offers rooms for poor people within Merton. To the eastern border of the site, there is an access road, which is also owned by the council. And at the termination of the site is Walsford House, which is a former council housing block. The existing school building is single story, and I've got it here. This is the existing school building, single story, and it's in red brick with a pitch roof. Around the school is external playing fields. There's a multi-use games area. There's also a woodland area to the south, as well as a row of mature trees to the north. The area relevant to the application is to the east of the school block. And this is part of the Mitchum Cricket Green Conservation Area. There's also designated a green corridor and open space. So the proposal involves the formation of a primary school element to the secondary school and be formed along the southern and eastern side. This involves the construction of a two-story hall. So the two-story hall is here, as well as a school block. And then at the bottom, here we go. This is the internal plans. You can see the proposed classroom block, which is here, which comprises 4 classrooms. There's an internal corridor. there's storage as well as toilets. The hall is a singular space. The new built form on the site will be configured around the upgraded multi-games area with the woodland to the south of the site. The building would be finished in red brick with timber paddling and cladding. The new built massing on the site would be configured, also proposed is a new drop-off area, which would have the collecting area for students, as well as would have parking as well. So if I scroll down, you've got the elevations of the school block, as well as the hall. And there's also a 3D model here. So you've got the existing secondary school building, the school hall, and the school block. And it's also important to be aware that the special needs of the students, because of the special needs of the school students, the primary school pupils will not be integrated with the secondary school pupils. So to achieve this, certain spaces such as a new classroom block and drop-off and collection area would be for the sole use of the primary school. The hall and the multi-games area would be shared. This has meant that the position of the buildings on the site has to be arranged in a particular manner to be fit for the school's needs. In terms of council policy, development proposals for new schools or improved education facilities are supported in the local plan. Part of the school's building would be located in designated open space, which the council ordinarily seeks to protect. However, this needs to be weighed against the benefits of the scheme, including improving the quality of the multi-games area, there'd be an improved access road from Church Road into the school. And in addition, the school would also enter a community use agreement, allowing the public to use the multi-games area and the hall out of school hours. And I've got a few photographs as well. So this is taken from Church Road, the access road from Church Road. This area here would be upgraded. You're going to have the drop-off and collection area and parking along here. If you go up a little bit further, so the school would be built along this area here, with much of the school classroom block built above this concrete pad. The hall itself, which is 2-story, would connect the southern tip of the existing school block, and it'd be formed along this part here. That's existing school. The site itself is down to the left-hand side. Another photograph looking south, and that's looking north. So the proposal also involves the removal of 7 trees, and the 7 trees are outlined in with these red circles. The applicant has submitted a tree assessment which details that 4 of the trees are of low quality with various health defects, and 3 other trees are medium quality. A scheme for the tree replanting would be secured by condition. So that's the application. And the school in itself, the school building in itself, would have the capacity for 76 school places. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Could call on Tony Burton, please. Jordan, could you please remove your plans? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening again. I'm Tony Burton, Secretary of Mitchum Cricket Green Community and Heritage, the civic society for this part of Mitchum. Melrose School plays an important educational and community role in the area. Its green and wooded grounds make a positive contribution to the distinct character of the range of educational, institutional office buildings set in landscaped grounds which were a feature of this part of Cricket Green. We recognise the need for expansion. As with other plans you are considering this evening, we believe it can be achieved in a less damaging way. We regret the lack of any local engagement in the proposals before they were submitted. The current plans will build over the large part of the school's remaining open grounds. They will fell significant trees owned by Morden Council, and they will cause the loss of designated open land and green corridor. Remarkably, the plans come with no promise even to replace the trees that are being lost, while also, ironically, proposing to create a new woodland teaching area for the children. The planning application is supported by a clearly flawed and incomplete heritage assessment. It is as if the authors have never read the conservation area appraisal, with its stress on the importance of both trees and open grounds as critical to the area's character. The assessment cannot even locate the nearest listed buildings, claiming the Cricket Green Arch as the nearest listed asset, despite Grade 2 listed buildings in Church Road and the Old Vicarage being closer to the site. Members of this committee should be in no doubt that this plan causes harm to the conservation area. And once again, there are alternatives. The plans failed to win the support of your own design review panel, and we support their option for a different design to maintain more open space, improve the layout, and take pressure off tree loss. Government policy is clear, and I quote, "Permission should be refused for development of poor design that fails to take the opportunities available for improving the character and quality of an area and the way it functions. This development fails that test. The opportunity for a better design is clear to see." Again, you are faced with turning down a planning application from Merton Council. This cannot be easy, but your independence is important. We believe planning permission should be refused and an alternative approach brought forward, which develops less of the site and does not conflict with policies CS13, DMD1, DMD2, DMD4, and DMO2, or harm the conservation area. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew Baldwin, please.
Chair Matthew Baldwin wasn't able to attend.
Okay, then can I call, first of all, let's go back to the officer to take up any points there. Are there any issues you want to pick up on, please, Jordan?
Yes. I'll just say that in terms of the loss of trees, one of the conditions that were put in the planning decision, if you were to recommend approval, is for a tree planting scheme to be submitted to the council that will be reviewed by our arboricultural officer. And should we approve that scheme, they'd have to obviously plant the trees in accordance with that condition. In terms of the heritage appraisal, I went through and I read the Cricket Green conservation area appraisal. It does talk about the type and the character of the area. In terms of this area, there's no kind of particular, despite its kind of heritage designation, there's no kind of special heritage quality of the area. The building to the north is called Hall Place. That's listed on the map as having a negative impact on the conservation area. The school is only a neutral impact. Other buildings within the immediate surrounding area are also neutral. As you can see by the photographs that I showed, the boundary of the site is quite a tall, kind of hostile-looking fence. There's also a huge amount of just quite a blank concrete slab as well. So that's kind of the character of the area that's there. And in terms of what they're trying to do, you've got to make a decision about whether that's harmful to that area as well as to the context of the area. And that's with consideration towards the buildings that are around it that are of no kind of particular heritage value. In terms of building on open space, as I said before, there are very much a lot of value that's coming from the scheme. And for one thing, there's no public accessibility into the school at the moment. One of the things that this permission would secure is a community use agreement that allows access to the multi-games area and to the hall. So that's a huge benefit. And in terms of winning or failing to win support by the planning review panel, it was given an amber rating. The panel generally liked the design, although they're wondering whether certain places or certain buildings could be reconfigured. From the information that's come back from the applicant, they don't think it can be because of the practical needs to try and have the buildings arranged in a certain manner, as well as keeping the primary school element separate from the secondary school element. But they have made changes as well. They've created more permeability as well through the classrooms into the woodland area to the south. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ellie Ellie Stringer.
Thank you. Having previously been speaking on the previous item as a ward councillor, I'm now speaking in my role as the Cabinet Member for Children's Services and Education. So in doing so, I'm speaking on behalf of some of our most vulnerable children in Merton, those with social, emotional and mental health needs. This application is about a modest extension, but that would allow 24 primary school children with such needs that cannot be met in our mainstream schools to be educated closer to their home in Merton, rather than transported outside the borough, as is currently the case. We're proud of the work of our special schools in Merton. Melrose is an exceptional school, which we want to expand to accept these primary school age pupils. And this design has been worked on closely with the existing secondary school to provide the best learning experience for children. So as has been discussed, a new building inevitably has to be built on open space. But as you've seen from the photos, the land that is being used was previously derelict, and the external areas have been carefully considered to provide for the school's children and has the full support of the school. And as the report outlines, and as has been outlined by the officers tonight, we should balance the policy to protect open space with our responsibilities to offer high quality education for children with special needs. The project ensures that the school will have some indoor facilities for physical education. And as has just been discussed, whilst it did initially receive an amber from the design review panel, their comments have been taken on board and has improved the design. I share concerns about the loss of trees, though as I understand it, only 4 of those are assessed as category B trees of moderate quality. And as has been discussed, 3 replacements will be made. So overall, in the interest of Merton's provision for some of our most vulnerable children, I would urge you to support this application. Thank you.
Thanks. I would say that I was at the design and review panel when this was discussed. I'm the chair, but we're not allowed to comment on it, and it was well received, I have to say, overall. There were certainly modifications which were suggested, but also as an ex-teacher, I know for a fact that you're dealing there with very vulnerable young people, and there are serious constraints about how you can allow people to move around that building, particularly in terms of security. And I know that the design and review panel were conscious of that, but they were looking at it as a 2nd-story building, which just really wasn't workable. So I just wanted to add those comments because it was favourably viewed really at design and review. So questions, please. No questions. Goodness me. Comments. Yes, Councillor Dean.
So I think the challenge always for the council is that when it does make proposals at this planning committee, I don't think anything's ever been rejected, particularly when it comes to education and with special needs too. But this is a planning meeting, and as much as it's very important that this building goes ahead, equally other council officers need to think about their role. And it isn't just about education. This is about development. This is about buildings. And I don't think that the officers have thought through the other aspects of this particular application. And I don't think it's right that we just have a vague aspiration that we'll look at trees. I think that we have to put in conditions now that they will all be replaced. And because it takes a number of years for trees to get to mature, and I don't know how old these trees are, but if they are mature trees of 40 years, then they need to be replaced 3 times. There's space enough, and if there isn't, there's space enough locally. And I do think that we need to put a condition in now that we have 7+ trees and up to 21 to be placed in this area. I know everybody does care deeply about the children that go to the school, and I know everybody understands all the issues that they face. We all have people close to us that have these particular conditions and issues, but they need to be in an area which is beautiful, and they need to make sure there is no air toxicity. So I'm asking as a condition that a significant number of trees are added in the vicinity, and then I'm sure everybody will vote positively anyway, but let's do it holistically, not just in terms of putting a building up.
Jordan, would you like to comment on that?
I think that's fine if that's what you're doing. I'll just read out the condition that I've got at the moment, which is condition 8. And it
Okay.
says no development shall take place until full details of a landscaping and planting scheme has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. And those works should be carried out as approved before the commencement of the use or the occupation of any buildings hereby approved, unless otherwise agreed in writing by the local planning authority. And I've got the details to include a plan, full details of the size, species, spacing, quantities, and location of proposed plants, together with any hard surfacing, means of enclosure, and indications of all existing trees, hedges, any other feature to be retained, and measures for the protection during the course of development. So I suppose it's just whether you want to go above and beyond that condition that's there at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Ward. You have to unmute.
Comment. I'll wait till comment.
Yeah, any more questions? Comments? David Ward. Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, as the officers just read out, the condition on the landscaping, condition 8, is fairly standard and also fairly comprehensive, and deals with, I hope, deals with all of Councillor Dean's concerns about trees on the site. I don't see any particular need to add more conditions and being overly prescriptive about exactly which trees and where. The condition is quite clear that there needs to be provision of trees on the site before it's opened and during construction. So okay. I think it's perfectly acceptable as is. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, please? Councillor Dean? I'll take you, Councillor Henry, in a moment.
I'm sorry. Specifically about Harris School, back what must be 2 years ago, I managed to say that we needed to put trees in there, and the officers agreed with 107. The school opens next week, and there's still no sign of anything. So I'm sorry, officers. I understand that you're doing your job, and you will do your job professionally, but I will be on your case, and I'd rather you make that commitment now, because I'm not going to go away until it's done, and we can't be vague here, really. We keep talking in council meetings about climate emergencies, more trees, toxic air. Got to make it happen, and I can't just accept vagaries. I hear what your face is telling me. Let's just get on with it, but you've got my opinion.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
Right, thank you, Chair. For me, I just want to say I'm really grateful for this application and improvement to the school and also to our community and area where it is at. And I know if the officers who are sitting on the board tonight really look at the condition, what it is now, we all would say that this application should go through, not only for us, the children, but as Councillor Dean says, our trees are very important, and I'm sure there will be, the council ensure that trees are replaced, the one that has been taken, will be taken down. And, you know, congratulations to the developers and the person who are putting this forward.
Thank you. Any other comments? Then I'm moving to the vote. Can I see those in favour, please? That is with accepting the condition that we have about trees, which is within the report. And those against, please. Someone's got, yeah, okay, hands down. And now we're electronically voting, please. Have we all voted? That's 100% for. Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I would like to just call a 5-minute break. So, okay. We're just waiting for Councillor Making. Are we all present? Is Councillor Ward there? Yeah. Okay, I think we can resume. Are we okay, Louise?
Yep, ready to go, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we're moving to agenda item 7, which is 101 Hamilton Road.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks,
Members,
Chair.
just going to share my screen. Bear with me a second. So hopefully you can see that.
Can see the screen, yeah. Yeah.
Members, the application is at 101 Hamilton Road. It's on the southern part of Hamilton Road in South Wimbledon. The site is set behind some ground floor commercial units on Morden High Street and some residential above, and the site surroundings are largely residential beyond. The proposal itself is for erection of a building to comprise 5 residential dwellings. 1 2-bedroom flat and 1 3-bedroom flat would be on this side of the building here, and the rest would be 3 5-bedroom dwelling houses. Each of the dwelling houses would have the private rear garden with ancillary outbuilding, and the flats would have a mixture of small courtyard and small garden for the ground floor flat, and balcony for the top floor flat. As I said, is for 3 houses and 2 flats. So first floor, 3 bedrooms for the houses. The first floor flat, there would be 1 bedroom, and then there would be 2 bedrooms above to make that a 3-bed flat. Proposal includes rooms within sort of the roof space in terms of its design, along with, as you can see, single-story sort of wraparound sections throughout. That's the roof plan. Really, the design is a sort of modern twist, you could say, on the traditional housing in the street, with slate roofs and rear dormers and mansard roof extensions going back. Looking at the rear, so proposed rear elevation, the ridge height is just marginally proposed to be above the ridge height of the adjoining dwelling, adjoining flats to the north, and it would be slate clad rear dormers with exposed brick in its design. You can see the 2 flats would have privacy screenings here to restrict overlooking to the east. Looking at the front elevations, as I said, largely traditional in character, with some more modern features such as front zinc-clad dormer windows, entrance directly off the street for each of the units, and they all have front small garden areas at the front to house bin storage and cycle storage. Some section drawings. You'll see in the site pictures that the adjoining building to the north does have a large sort of parapet wall, which is on the boundary, which the proposal seeks to adjoin to. There's no basement proposed with this scheme. Members will note that in the planning history, an application did come before committee last year for 13 flats, which included a basement. However, that was refused for the reasons set out. Looking at some of the visual aids coming through, so this is taken from the design access statement. Low boundary wall railings at the front with pedestrian access to each unit. as I say, exposed facing brick with bay windows in its design. Looking at the top, this just shows in the purple is what used to be on site, what's called Rose Cottage, and in blue was the previous scheme for 13 flats. That is just to show it has been set off the boundary to the south in respect of the two-storey aspect. However, what is proposed, it adjoins the party flank wall here of that property to the north. So really just going through some of the visual aids submitted. So you can see a lot of the design has taken and the rear sort of dormers with mansard roof extensions going back, largely as if they've been, you sometimes see on extensions to existing traditional housing. You can just see the visual aid here from the front looking south on Hamilton Road, and then here from High Street. Just re-emphasise some of the screening anticipated for some of the first floor balconies. This is the previous scheme, just for reference, Chair, if members wish to refer to it. Just the roof plan of the previous and a visual aid. That was a larger scheme which came further forward in terms of building line. Site pictures. That's the flank wall that the proposal seeks to adjoin to of the neighbouring property to the north. As you can see, the site is clear and has been for a few years. Largely hard standing. It used to comprise a business unit at the back and a house of multiple occupation towards the front. That's just showing the street north in Hamilton Road, just showing some of the types of traditional housing in the street. And then the site here with some of the housing there on the left-hand side. And you'll note in the proposal, it includes the provision for 2 on-street additional parking spaces, which would benefit the existing CPZ for all users. Chair, if I can turn your attention now to the modification sheet, you'll note in the committee report, the Transport Planning Officer's comments was based on the original scheme, whereby the original scheme was put forward on the basis that the applicant sought no car parking restrictions at all for the 5 units. However, you'll note in the report that officers have been in discussions with the applicant and they've now put forward an amended scheme where it will be restricted to 1 permit would be allowed for just each of the 3 houses proposed. And you'll note the transport comments have been revised and they are now happy with that recommendation. So overall, Chair, officers consider this to be a good use of a vacant brownfield site in South Wimbledon with an appropriate design and scale of development, which now officers consider has overcome the previous refusals that have been on this site before. Thank you.
Thank you. Call on Eve Cohen, please.
Thank you. Whilst I applaud this latest planning application for this site for being so much better than previous planning applications and for providing family homes, there is still concerns about the design, outdoor space and parking. And the 5-bed, 10-person houses suggests overcrowding if at full occupancy. The frontage, in particular the dormer windows, is out of character with the adjoining properties and thus against policy DMD2. The planning department report states, other dormers in the Hamilton Road street scene exist and have not been successfully introduced as often. These are standalone additions which do not relate well to the original design. I walked along Hamilton Road today. The properties go from number 1 to number 102. Of these 102, only 3 have dormer windows. Poor planning design and permissions in the past do not justify poor planning decisions now or in the future. The dormer windows at the front of the proposed properties are too bulky and do not relate well to the character of the street. With a little softening of the frontage, this issue could be resolved. The dark grey window frames are not in keeping with the street scene, again against DMD2, and are certainly not elegant as described in Savills planning statement. Traditional window frame colour in the area is white. In fact, page 32 of Stainsby Architecture's Design and Access Statement demonstrating the materials to be used includes a picture of a yellow brick facade with white window frames, clearly showing how much better white window frames look. Please make it a condition that the window frames are white. There is insufficient cycle storage. A 5-bed, 10-person property needs more than 2 cycle storage spaces, especially if these are family homes with children, each of whom may well have a bicycle. To encourage active travel, surely more than 2 cycle spaces should be provided per property. Please make it a condition to have additional cycle storage for each property. I applaud the proposed restriction to a total of 3 residence parking permits. There's extreme pressure on the CPZ in this street, so please make it a condition that 3 additional CPZ spaces are provided. The ground floor garden space for 5-bed, 10-person family properties is too small, especially given the lessons learned from the current COVID-19 outbreak and the importance of outdoor space. One house has a particularly small garden compared to the other 2. The outdoor space for the ground floor flat is small, and the upper flat has no access to ground floor outdoor space. I'm unable to find the indoor plan or design of the ancillary buildings in the gardens of the 3 houses.
This is your second warning.
Are these designed to be offices, summer houses, sheds? I assume there are no toilet facilities in these buildings, so they should not be used as bedrooms. Please add a restriction on their use so that unscrupulous landlords cannot rent them out as bedrooms. With a little tweaking, this development could be more in keeping with the street scene and looked on with pride and pleasure by the community for very many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call on Matt? No, I'm on the wrong one there. Matt Richards, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Matt Richards, planning agent from Savills. Firstly, I'd like to thank officers for their presentation, and their recommendation for approval is welcomed. This site needs a new lease of life. It's a brownfield site in a sustainable location, and it's remained dormant for some time. As your officers noted, the application you heard last year proposed 13 flats in a single apartment block with accommodation at basement level, and the committee found that too excessive. The application now before you is proposed by a new owner of the site and seeks to bring this vacant brownfield land back into active use, to provide much needed residential accommodation, but in a manner that comprehensively overcomes the committee's concerns with the previous development. Working with your officers, the current proposal sees no notable reductions in scale and quantum and has been designed to reflect the existing character of Hamilton Road. Properties extend to 2 stories with accommodation in roof, like other properties in the street. The design echoes the street's existing height, form and rhythm, but has its own modern interpretation in terms of window and brick detailing. The properties are set back from the road with landscaping included in the front gardens, and the rear part of the site includes gardens with single-storey, I would stress here, ancillary outbuildings for the family units. Some objections have been made to the proposed front dormers, and in response we would note that large front dormers are present in the streets and do form part of its character. The proposal is for a modern interpretation of the existing properties, and we feel they complement the overall scheme. In terms of parking, 2 new parking bays are proposed, and that they would be created on Hamilton Road. The 2 masonettes will not be eligible to park there, but the 3 family houses will be permitted to have only 1 parking permit each. So there will only be 3 additional permits allowed, as well as the introduction of 2 new parking bays. Existing residents who have parking permits will be able to use these new parking bays, and the reality is that only 1 additional car will be added to the CPZ, and the development will also benefit from a 3-year car club membership. This is also a notable improvement on the pre-existing situation, where the business units and the 10-bed HMO could all have parking permits. We note that your highways officer also has now not got any objections to the scheme. Mix of sizes are proposed, and the 3 family houses and 2 masonette flats. They're all dual aspect and comply with the required space standards and have private amenity spaces in the form of gardens or balconies in line with the council standards. Cycle parking and bin storage is also provided in line with the council standards. The scheme's also been designed to protect the amenity of neighbours, including appropriate screening of the balconies adjacent to 97 Hamilton Road. And as your officers conclude, there's no undue daylight or sunlight impact to the neighbours, and their outlook will be preserved. In terms of sustainability, solar panels are proposed on parts of the roof, and there will be a 19% reduction on carbon emissions over building reg requirements. Importantly, the scheme now has no outstanding objections from any of the statutory consultees. So in summary, the proposal we feel accords with your development plan and the MPPPF. It will result in a number of planning benefits, including the delivery of high-quality homes in a sustainable location. The application represents the
This is
sustainable
your
development of the
32nd
site,
warning.
and we therefore respectfully request the application is approved.
Thank you. Tim, did you want to come back on any of that?
Just briefly, Chair, just some of the main points. The front dormer windows. Yes, there are some in the street scene of Hamilton Road, but what we've considered is, well, some of those in the street have been added on post build of obviously the original property. Some have been done through old permitted development rights used to allow such roof extensions, which they no longer do, only on the rear. But with this site being down at the end of the road, we feel there is greater flexibility here for a comprehensive scheme built as one which can incorporate these dormer windows. But I appreciate that is a matter of visual judgment. With regard to garden spaces, officers have reassessed and recalculated the garden space accurately, and that is reported in the modification sheet, where all garden space proposed does meet the minimum, does meet the standards in policy. I appreciate the garden sizes for the houses aren't the biggest, but they do meet the 50 square meters. It's a challenging site, but we feel that the scheme does provide a good balance between new housing and garden space for those houses as well. The ancillary buildings at the back, they are a single story as one building, and it is divided internally with internal walls. But it is what it is. It's a very small space for each house, and so yes, it is to be used ancillary, which can be a home office or storage or the like. In regard to parking, the proposal does include 2 new on-street parking bays. You'll note in the report that the previous scheme for the flats also did include the 2 on-street parking bays, and was to be secured through the appropriate Section 278 works with our highways team, and they are proposed in the exact same location as previously, which are deemed to be acceptable. So we consider here as a good balance between provision of housing, the loss of the previous uses on the site, which could have had parking permits, and then this scheme proposes to seek control with one permit per house, which we consider is reasonable given the houses are 5-bedroom and likely could be large families living within the houses. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, could you just comment on the number of cycle spaces, please, because that was mentioned, and also the issue about white window frames?
Cycle spaces, they are in line with the policy, and the storage space is indicated to be at the front.
Okay.
With the bin storage, but they are in line with London Plan policy.
Okay, and the window frame issue that was raised by
window frames. Yes, grey. As far as I'm aware, with the scheme is proposed. We are imposing the condition for samples of materials, and windows can form part of that. So I'll be interested to hear that perhaps a debate with committee on whether white would be more appropriate, but we can take note of that, and that can be perhaps included within that materials condition.
Okay, thank you. Can Louise please read Councillor Benbow's statement? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I fully welcome the latest development plans at 101 Hamilton Road, a huge turnaround compared with the previous planning application that was rejected last year on the 22nd of August. Please note that I support the need to redevelop the old 101 Hamilton Road site, but there are still some specific design issues, and it is still imposing comparing to the existing Victorian terrace houses in Hamilton Road and the surrounding area. Also, I fully concur with the residents' grave concerns about the ongoing parking problems on Hamilton Road. The revised development will have 4 houses, but one of them built into 2 flats and again squeezed into 1 plot of land. Having looked at the latest planning application, it is clear that the developer has now listened to our concerns after the previous 2 rejected applications. However, the remaining question I have is why not keep with the appearance and character of the beautiful Victorian terraced houses in Hamilton Road and surrounding area? The development is still too large for Hamilton Road, which is detrimental. Whether or not the proposal would provide acceptable living conditions for the occupiers of the new building, it will certainly affect the neighbours at 97 Hamilton Road, 208 to 210 Merton High Street and 111 Hardy Road concerning privacy, light and outlook. The design of the terrace buildings and flats are not in keeping with the character and appearance of Hamilton Road. I'm concerned about 4 large front dormer windows and the design of the road facing sloping roof, which would have an unacceptable adverse impact on the character and appearance of the locality and property, as it would be seen visually intrusive. Whilst 2 new parking spaces are proposed outside the development, I'm disappointed to find no further adequate provision has been made for parking, and this must be considered. It is already a huge concern for the existing residents. The current parking on Hamilton Road is already extremely difficult, and many already pay for parking permits. The proposed development could easily, without restrictions, lead to an extra 6 to 10 parking permits being sought. I fear this will add more pressure to a very strained situation and may cause safety issues and consequently illegal or unsafe parking on the street. I therefore strongly propose this application be sent back to the drawing board, and I would urge a redesign of the development appearance, perhaps consider removing the large dormer windows, giving it a feel of the Victorian terraced housing. Parking remains a major concern for highway safety, and this cannot be ignored. Perhaps the council should consider working with the developer, finding a practical solution.
It's your 30-second warning.
If this planning application is granted, I fear this will be the start of a knock-on effect to future planning applications, hence destroying the beautiful character of our Victorian roads, known as the famous Battles area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions? No questions. Okay, comments? Good Lord. No comments. So we're going to move to the vote. Can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please show? And can we take that electronically, please? Oh, sorry, those against and not voting. Can we take that electronically, please? Thank you. That's 100% accepted. So the recommendation is approved. Thank you. We now move to agenda item 9, which is 2 Westcombe Avenue. And I understand that Councillor Dean and Councillor Crowe are not taking part in this. So are you switching out? They've gone. Don't know where they've gone, but they've gone. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So just as a bit of background, the application was heard at last month's committee, where members voted to approve subject to viewing and agreeing the proposed materials. The applicant has since come back with a proposed material schedule with 2 options, and a condition, the materials condition has been amended with wording to allow for an agreed option, if so, to be inserted. So if I'll share my screen. The application is at 2 Westcombe Avenue in West Wimbledon. It's this property here. It adjoins, but is not within the Westcombe Avenue conservation area, which is to the south here. It's a more zoomed in block plan. This is the roof plan. So if I go down to the existing drawings, the house here, detached, 2 stories. The proposals are for a 2-story side extension, which you can see here, which extends the side element here with part single, part 2-story rear element, and a rear roof extension. Some more detailed plans. And so the applicant has provided this material schedule showing specific material specifications. The material choice has regard to material availability at the moment, considering the pandemic situation, and has provided two options. First option is sought to relate more closely to the existing materials of the house. So you have a darker grey-brown roof slate, which would be applied to both the wall hanging tiles to the bays, the first floor front element, and the roof tiles. The rendered elements of the scheme would use a white render as per the existing rendered elements of the house, and would use a darker, more brown brick and grey aluminium coated windows. Option B would use slightly more red in colour tiles and brickwork, as you can see here, also with white render and grey aluminium coated windows. It should be noted that the condition, whilst it offers the choice in these materials, would have a section at the end which would require the brickwork to match in both style and colour. So the pointing you can see, sorry, the pointing of the brickwork, the pointing that you can see in these examples is only indicative from the material specifications. It would be required to match in style and colour to the existing. I have a few computer generated images showing each of the options. So this is option A with the more brown sort of brickwork and roof tiles at the front, and then this is at the rear. And then option B with the more red style materials at the front and at the rear. I've got some photos of the existing property now. So that's the property there, I think with red painted hanging tiles. And you can see the roof tiles and brickwork there. And then this is the adjoining property at 233 Coombe Lane, which has had a fairly recent extension, and you can see the choice of materials there. And then moving, so the site's on the right hand side here. Onto the opposite side, you've got a fairly modern development with slightly different coloured materials used there. This is looking at the side of the property, so the application site's on the right hand side. This is a property within Westcombe Avenue, which is in the conservation area to the rear. You can see the materials there. This is also opposite the site, a property which isn't in the conservation area. And then everything to the right here is within the conservation area. And these are the properties to the rear of the site within the conservation area on West Coombe Lane Avenue. And a few more examples from that same area. Thank you.
Could you just leave options 1 and 2 on the screen, because I think we're going to have a quick vote here. There's not an awful lot between them, really, is there?
No, to be honest, it's a matter of different shades of reddy brown, really. If you like, let me know and I can show you the existing house again, but these would be the material choice.
So the ones that's closest is option A?
I would say so, yeah. You've got the darker red and a more brown tile there.
Okay, so all we're doing with this is voting for option A or option B.
Correct.
Okay, so we don't need a screen anymore. I think we've seen it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So can I just see those in favour of option A? Please show. Okay, so how are we doing with that? 1, 2, 3. This is overwhelming, isn't it? Really, I would say option A has it, and I don't think, do we need to go to electronic vote for that? Because I think it's pretty obvious. The majority of the
I made that 5-4, Chair.
You made it 5 for 4, not 4.
No, sorry, 5 for option A.
5 for option A. Okay, so we've dropped 2 members, so that would be 3 who didn't vote. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I think we'll accept option A in that case then. We're happy with that. Just nod. Okay, thank you. So now so that's our recommendation. So now we move to agenda item 10, which is the planning appeals decision, which is to note. And there've been no appeal decisions issued. And then finally to agenda item 11, which is the planning enforcement summary. And if you do have any issues you wish to take up with officers over planning enforcement, please can you do that directly? Yes, Councillor Dean.
Just one thing I brought up earlier. So the Harris
Yeah.
School is opening on Monday, I understand, Monday week, but I still haven't had any response from officers in terms of where the 107 trees are going to go and when they're going to go in. So we don't need an answer now, but it
No.
would be nice in the next 15 days to get a response because clearly it was a planning condition.
Okay, thank you. Right, on that basis, then I will declare the meeting closed and thank you for your time this evening. Good night.
Well done, Linda. Thank you for everything.
Good night.
Thank you, Linda. See you later.
you.